pink cards were when we had to speak in chapel. Everybody, so you're the speaker up here, so everybody in the audience that day got a pink card, and they got to fill out that pink card and let you know how you did. Yeah, sometimes it was interesting. So I don't know if ABI has changed that or not. That's been a long time ago, like 20 years ago. Okay, so like he said, today is the last lesson in this Navigate series. It's been an interesting journey. If you guys haven't gotten anything out of it, I will say that I have. A lot of good content, a lot of good things that sometimes just doesn't get delved into, because when we talk about, when we're preaching and we're talking about the Bible and stuff like that, it's not always, there's wonderful, great points. It's the Bible, of course, but some of these things that he discusses in here is sometimes things that people try to avoid talking about because it gets to the heart of issues and it makes people want to resolve things. So, Jeremy, you want to put that title slide up? Today's lesson is about adaptive armor. Adaptive armor. So armor is something that an armor bearer puts on for protection. Having adaptive armor means properties change to best suit its wearer or the environment. So I don't know how many of you play video games, but in video games, some of them have what they call adaptive armor, and that's dependent on the class or level and the fictional armor that shape shifts for different combat or environmental changes within that video game. So I don't know a whole lot about Fortnite, just a little bit what the boys play and stuff like that, but I do know they can change their skins, what they call skins, which is like what they wear per, the environment or what's going on. So I don't know if that's really adaptive armor, but there are games where you're changing per the different levels, okay? So adaptive armor is armor that automatically morphs into the best type of armor you can wear when you put it on. That's what it means by adaptive. It's changing into the best type when you put it on. So oftentimes when we hear the word armor, we're thinking of the armor of God. I know Sister Savage talks a lot about the armor of God with the kids, and she's really good at doing the different things. So when you hear the word armor, oftentimes we think about what they talk about or break down in the book of Ephesians, which is the armor of God. And that's the belt of truth, the breastplate of righteousness, the shoes of gospel of peace, the shield of faith, the helmet of salvation, and the sword, which is God's word. By understanding and practicing those virtues, individuals can be better equipped to face spiritual battles and live righteously. But when we talk about adaptive armor, we're actually speaking in regards to a pseudo-identity that manifests itself in times of fear or insecurity. So a pseudo-identity is something you are not, a person you are not. Adaptive armor will cause us to adopt personality traits that are generally not part of our true God-given identity. It can also intensify existing personality traits in an effort to protect us from a perceived emotional or physical threat. So when you're perceiving a physical or emotional threat, you put on a pseudo-personality. Adaptive armor can give us the perception of safety for a short time, but generally it becomes maladaptive and has a negative impact on our relationships and our general life positions because it's not really who you are. So we're going to break it down just a little bit. We're going to do a lot of Bible reading today. So if you want to follow along, I'm going to have Jeremy put up scriptures. The first one, well, it's all in 1 Samuel, but the first section we're going to read is from chapter 17, verses 1 through 11. So if Jeremy puts it up, you can read along with me. And I'm going to ask for your forgiveness because there's a lot of these funky words of, our cities and names and things that are just not always pronounced exactly how they probably should be. Now the Philistines gathered together their armies to battle and were gathered together at Shoco, which belongeth to Judah, and pitched between Shoco and Azekah in Ephes-Dammim. And Saul and the men of Israel were gathered together and pitched by the valley of Elah and set the battle in array against the Philistines. And the Philistines stood on a mountain on the one side, and Israel stood on the mountain on the other side. And there was a valley between them. And there went out a champion out of the camp of the Philistines named Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. And he had a helmet of brass upon his head, and he was armed with a coat of mail, and the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of brass. And he had greaves of brass upon his legs, and a target of brass between his shoulders. And the staff of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his spear's head weighed 600 shekels of iron, and one bearing a shield went before him. And he stood and cried unto the armies of Israel, and said unto them, Why are ye come out to set in battle array? Am I not a Philistine, and ye servants to Saul? Choose you a man for you, and let him come down to me. And if he be able to fight with me and to kill me, then we will be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then ye shall be our servants and serve us. And the Philistine said, I defy the armies of Israel this day. Give me a man that we may fight together. When Saul and all Israel heard these words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. So we can see in this Bible account, all of you should know the account of David and Goliath, right? It's one that we hear from a small child. But nobody really ever talks about the pseudo-identity that was kind of pushed upon David. We can see in this account that Goliath asked for just one man to come out in the valley and fight him to determine the outcome of that battle between the Israelites and the Philistines. The Philistines were attempting to take advantage of the fact that they had a giant who was an accomplished champion warrior. They wanted to tip the scales in their favor by setting the terms of the battle. They wanted to use their greatest man. Well, if you think about it, that's exactly what Satan does in our lives. He tries to set the terms of battle. He makes it a battle between him and us. And he excludes the fact that God's on our side. So if we allow the devil to define the terms of battle, then he is at a distinct advantage. And that advantage is called isolation. Because if he can get the battle to be between us and him, and make us think that God's no longer there or God is on our side, we become isolated. So isolation comes when we are surrounded by fear and insecurities, and we respond by utilizing our adaptive armor as a means to cope. We believe the lie that we have to face our giants alone and that we are just not enough. Then we put on a mask to make us seem like more than we really are. I was thinking about this just in this lesson, and I kind of started delving into, it sounds weird because, if I ask you this question, why do people who commit crimes wear masks? Right, it's pretty obvious. Like, they're trying to just hide their face. They're going in to rob a bank. They're going in to do something. They don't want to be seen, right? But there's more to it. It's a deeper thing. So I was kind of reading into it, and it says a couple things here, a couple points that I thought was interesting. It says some research suggests that people who wear masks feel more empowered and more enabled to do things than they normally would. So it makes them feel stronger, okay? It gives them a sense of strength. That sense of invisibility can reduce their inhibitions against committing a crime. So they just feel like they're, untouchable, basically, because they have a mask on. With this being said, this just takes me back. I like to watch cop stuff where they're chasing people down. I don't know why. It just interests me. These people that think that they're just, just total lawlessness, right? And evidently it was in Wisconsin. The roads are so icy. I lived in Minnesota, so I can understand. They're just covered in snow, covered in ice. This guy's running from the police. And, of course, they have it all, because they have dash cams on everything. And they must have been already in trouble because they were running a plate. The plate was from Iowa, but this was happening in Wisconsin. So they're running from the cops. They're chasing them through these streets. The cops flying over these speed bumps. You can see the whole vehicle just, and the streets are icy. And they finally get to this point in the road where it's like a T, and there's no stopping because they're on ice. So the car goes down over the embankment into the creek. It was more of like a river. And the cop, as soon as he realized that car, that's where it was, he's like, oh, no, and there was no stopping. So there was two cops in this car, and you can both hear them like, oh, no, 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 and they're flying, and then they hit the car that landed at the bottom. Well, when the car that was running from the police, when they hit, the two guys, had flown out. Either they opened their doors and, just aborted mission or whatever, but the one guy, he is laying there, and when the cop car hits it, the guy's leg is stuck under the car. So then on the dash cam, you hear him. So first they go from running from the police to then this guy's like, help me, help me, help me. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And he's screaming in pain because his leg is pinned under the car. I'm like, that's really rich. You're running from the cops and then you want him to help you. So then the cop's trying to push the car off of his leg. I'm like, this is just crazy. What is wrong with people? So I feel like, and you see these people and they're running from the police and they think they're invincible in these sports cars and stuff. One was like a Mustang. They just think they're invincible and they're never going to get caught. So it gives them a sense of strength. So it's like the mask. When you wear a mask, it's giving these people a sense of just strength because their inhibitions are gone. They feel like they're more empowered to do things. It also said, in some cases, such as with certain movie villains, a mask is used to create a new, frightening identity. And that's used to intimidate and terrorize victims. So masks can be used to intimidate people, to make you feel stronger. Another reason to wear a mask is to evading long-term consequences. So without a clear picture of the perpetrator, cases can go unresolved, allowing the offender to escape justice and prosecution. So if you think about in the way that we wear a mask, if we wear a mask, we don't have to face the truth or deal with what the real issue is. And that kind of goes along with what it's saying there. When somebody wears a mask, they're evading the long-term consequences. Well, when we put on masks, we're evading having to deal with what the real issue is, right? So if we look at the reverse of this idea, we'll see that facing our fears and effectively addressing them means that there is no need for an adaptive armor or mask. We can actually live the way God intended with peace and purpose. So if we face our fears and we effectively deal with them, we have no reason to wear adaptive armor or masks. So we're going to go back into 1 Samuel chapter 17, but we're going to start at verse 12 where we left off. And this one's a little longer, so I apologize. Now David was the son of that Ephrathite of Bethlehem, Judah, whose name was Jesse, and he had 8 sons, and the man went among men for an old man in the days of Saul. And the 3 eldest sons of Jesse went and followed Saul to battle. And the names of his 3 sons that went to the battle were Eliab the firstborn, and next unto him went Abinadab, and the third Shammah. And David was the youngest, and the 3 eldest followed Saul. But David went and returned from Saul to feed his father's sheep at Bethlehem. And the Philistine drew near morning and evening, and presented himself 40 days. And Jesse said unto David his son, Take now for thy brethren an ephah of the parched corn, and these 10 loaves, and run to the camp of thy brethren. And carry these 10 cheeses unto the captain of their 1,000, and look how thy brethren fare, and take their pledge. Now Saul and they and all the men of Israel were in the valley of Elah, fighting with the Philistines. And David rose up early in the morning, and left the sheep with a keeper, and took and went as Jesse had commanded him. And he came to the trench as the host was going forth to the fight, and shouted for the battle. For Israel and the Philistines had put the battle in array, army against army. And David left his carriage in the hand of the keeper of the carriage, and ran into the army, and came and saluted his brethren. And as he talked with them, behold, there came up the champion, the Philistine of Gath, Goliath by name, out of the armies of the Philistines, and spake according to the same words, and David heard them. And all the men of Israel, when they saw the man, fled from him, and were sore afraid. And the men of Israel said, Have ye seen this man that is come up? Surely to defy Israel is he come up. And it shall be that the man who killeth him, the king will enrich him with great riches, and will give him his daughter, and make his father's house free in Israel. And David spake to the man that stood by him, saying, What shall be done to the man that killeth this Philistine, and taketh away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine, that he should defy the armies of the living God? And the people answered him after this manner, saying, So shall it be done to the man that killeth him. And Eliab, his eldest brother, heard when he spake unto the men, and Eliab's anger was kindled against David, and he said, Why camest thou down hither, and with whom hast thou left those few sheep in the wilderness? I know thy pride and the naughtiness of thine heart, for thou art come down that thou mightest see the battle. And David said, What have I now done? Is there not a cause? And he turned from him toward another, and spake after the same manner. And the people answered him again after the former manner. And when the words were heard which David spake, they rehearsed them before Saul, and he sent for him. And David said to Saul, Let no man's heart fail because of him. Thy servant will go and fight with this Philistine. And Saul said to David, Thou art not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for thou art but a youth. and he a man of war from his youth. These are the key verses I really want you to listen to from 33 down. And David said unto Saul, thy servant kept his father's sheep. Is my battery dying, Jeremy? Sorry about that. Back up to verse 33. These are the key verses in this long, lengthy reading. And Saul said to David, thou art not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for thou art but a youth, and he is a man of war from his youth. And David said unto Saul, thy servant kept his father's sheep, and there came a lion and a bear, and took a lamb out of the flock. And I went out after him, and smote him, and delivered it out of his mouth. And when he arose against me, I caught him by his beard, and smote him, and slew him. Thy servant slew both the lion and the bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine shall be as one of them, seeing he hath defied the armies of the living God. David said, moreover, the Lord that delivered me out of the paw of the lion and out of the paw of the bear, he will deliver me out of the hand of the Philistine. And Saul said unto David, go, and the Lord be with thee. And Saul armed David with his armor, and he put an helmet of brass upon his head. Also he armed him with the coat of mail. And David girded his sword upon his armor, and he essayed to go, for he had not proved it. And David said unto Saul, I cannot go with these, for I have not proved them. And David put them off of him. So, there was a powerful message that was said here as this transpired, where David felt that he should go up against Goliath. And things were said, like for instance, Saul was saying, you're just a youth. What are you going to do? And then he proceeds to put his armor on him, which David's not used to wearing. So the powerful message that was being communicated to David in this interaction between him and his brothers and Saul was that he was not enough. He wasn't strong enough. He wasn't battle savvy enough. He didn't have enough experience. And that he needed to go back and take care of the sheep because he was only a boy. And that was the message that he heard from them. The power of these statements came from the fact that there was some truth in those statements. But because of how they said it and how they didn't believe with him that God was going to be with him, it caused him to have doubt. And then Saul trying to put on that extra armor kind of just solidified that we don't really believe in you for what you have, that God's going to be with you. Here, you need this extra armor. So that was an adaptive armor, so to speak, for him, instead of just being allowed to follow after God and trust in God during that time. They were kind of making it out to be, that David couldn't do it. And so he took that upon himself. Now, some of you might know the scripture, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. Well, when you hear things enough in your life, negativities and stuff, you begin to take that on if you're not careful. If you hear enough that you're not good enough, you're this, you're that, the list could go on and on and on of the different things that people have heard. But if you hear that enough from people, you take that on as truth and you think it in your heart, and that's who you become. And so I think that David had to be very careful when this message was echoed to him, because he could have really just walked away from that saying, I'm not enough. I'm just a shepherd boy, right? The truth that Saul and David's brothers failed to recognize was that David plus God was more than enough. And they failed to communicate that to David. David's fight record with the lion and the bear was proof, but David was tempted by Saul to replace God and trust him and replace that with an adaptive armor. He was told to rely on that physical armor, which was the helmet, the shield, and the sword, rather than trusting in God. Saul's message to David was, you can't face this fear without adding something to who you are. You need to put on that physical armor of protection to be able to survive this battle. So adaptive armor is forged when we feel unprotected and vulnerable in our fears and our insecurities. And out of seemingly nowhere, the armor appears to have a certain degree of effectiveness. So we put that on to protect ourselves. So I'll give you an example. So if someone has had things in their life that are seemingly out of control, just one thing after another, there's just things that they have no control over, and their life is just total chaos. What happens is they tend to become a controlling person because they want to feel power in a powerless situation. So they start to control things they can control. And that gives them a sense of power in a world of chaos, when their world is chaotic. The author of this book, he used an example. What his adaptive armor was rage. Because he says, when I was growing up, my biological father, Lloyd, treated me in ways that made me feel small and insignificant. Because of his own unresolved emotional wounds, he expressed himself in abusive ways. He would often ignore me or talk down to me. He would belittle me if I made a mistake. And I always hated going to the dinner table because he sat across from me. My perception was that he kept a constant eye on me, waiting for me to make a mistake. If a few kernels of corn fell off my plate, he would yell at me and say, if you're going to eat like a pig, then go to the trowel. And by saying this, he meant for me to take my plate and go in the bathtub. Eating in the bathtub didn't hurt me, but feeling small and insignificant really hurt me. Being told I was a pig and wasn't worthy to eat at the table with the rest of the family really hurt me. It was a pain that I was exposed to often. I lived in the chronic, inescapable stress of this happening to me at any time. It was out of my control, and as a little boy, I couldn't protect myself from it. So he goes on to talk about how out of his father that was just kind of mentally abusive, and who just kind of grilled insecurities into him through the way that he treated him, he put on the adaptive armor of rage, and that was how he dealt with life. And he goes on to say about how his mom and his dad actually ended up getting a divorce, but when he was a teenager, this story kind of sent me to tears, but he said that his mom would tell him, listen, if you don't get a hold of yourself and your rage, you're going to end up in jail. You're going to end up living your life in prison. And one day as a teenager, he said he was out on the sidewalk and a military guy kind of got in his face, and he could feel the rage building, and he tried to walk away, but he said the guy grabbed his Letterman jacket and spun him around. And he said from that moment forward, he doesn't even hardly remember what happened, other than the fact that he literally knocked the guy out cold into unconsciousness and was punching him so hard in the face that the guy went into seizures. He actually thought he killed the guy. He left. The guy survived, but it wasn't until the next day that somebody else, an onlooker or somebody that was with him, told him what happened, because he left the scene and he was in such a fit of rage that it was like he was out of body. He didn't even know what happened. And he said that was the kind of one of the turning points for him, but it continued on for years until he found the Lord. When he found God, he started to change that, and he realized that that was his adaptive armor to all of the things that he had gone through. That was his way of dealing with it. And so there's all kinds of crazy things that we put on as adaptive armor. And in a setting where it was more of like a Bible study, we would go around the room and we would, ask, what do you feel is your adaptive armor? Because I think everybody would have a different, just a lot of it's personality based, but a lot of it's just what you've been through and what helped you mask those problems. Jeremy, if you want to put up the first slide. I do want to read this part here. He says that in the long run, the little boy, he's talking about himself, the little boy was finally healed as God addressed my identity issues, and I realized who I was in Christ. He said that rage had become an idol that I had come to trust in order to feel safe. Rage was an adaptive coping behavior that had become very maladaptive in my life. So to him, it felt adaptive. It made him feel better. It kind of soothed what he wasn't dealing with, but ended up causing him more problems. He said, I adopted it and it worked to protect me in the short run, but it destroyed all of my relationships. It hurt too much to feel that small, and rage was what showed up to protect me. And I had to break my agreement with rage and trust God. So coming to God, he finally had to deal with that. So there's 2 slides. These are just some examples of some things that people take on as adaptive armor. The first one is the chameleon, somebody who you just blend just to keep the peace. You just blend with whatever situation you're in. That's an adaptive armor. The Eeyore, poor me mentality. The woe is me all the time. The people pleaser mentality. You do everything to try to please everybody around you. And that oftentimes that's at the expense of your own, just your own feelings and your own wants and needs in life, because you're trying to please everybody else, to keep everybody happy. The needy person, the person that just needs somebody all the time to fix everything for them. The tough girl or tough guy persona, which is I don't need anybody. Push everybody away. I don't need anybody. The superhero, and what that means is for everybody else, you try to help everybody else so that people can see you as a superhero, trying to always fix everybody else. The rager, which is what the author of the book talks about, what he was. Somebody who has constant rage, can't control their anger. The judge, somebody who's always judging other people. The gotta be right. I always gotta be right. The Mr. Google, I know everything. I'm always right about everything because it makes me feel good when people know that I know a lot of stuff. The class clown. How many of you knew a class clown in high school? Usually the class clown was the person that had a lot of problems at home. I'm not saying always. The doormat, the person that just takes whatever comes their way because they don't want to rock the boat. The overworker, I can do it all. That's the person that refuses to ask for help, won't let anybody do anything. They have to do it all themselves. The invisible person, and that, did you flip over? I don't know. Okay, yeah. The invisible person, they just kind of like the chameleon, but they just try to be invisible. The bully, they bully other people to make themselves feel better. The perfectionist, everything has to be just so. The overachiever. The victim mentality. I have things worse than you have it, and I'm going to let everybody know. The control freak, that's the person that wants to try to control everything, every little jot and tittle in their life. Because again, it gives them a sense of power in a powerless situation. The scorekeeper, and that's somebody that's going to keep score about everything that everybody does to you. You're going to keep record. So these are all adaptive armors that help us get by. And I don't know, as I go through them, maybe one resonated with you. I'm not here to point fingers at anybody because, again, I don't know the ins and outs of everybody's life. I can look and see what mine are. But it would be good to actually delve in to look at which of those, there might be more than one, do you connect with? Which one of those do you feel like is your adaptive armor? And what situation in life caused you to take on that adaptive armor? Because that's something, sometimes you have to go back to the root of the issue. Why did you start being that person? Why did you start taking on that adaptive armor? And another question I have is, what benefit can you see in releasing this adaptive armor and relying on God to guide and protect you? What benefit would come from that? I'm going to leave you with 2 scriptures. It's kind of a heavy message today because it's something that I feel like everybody deals with. Everybody puts on some type of adaptive armor to deal with situations that they've been through in their life. And a scripture that came to my mind when I was thinking about this is Psalms 139:14, and it says, I will praise thee, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are thy works, and that my soul knoweth right well. And I feel like the reason why God just quickened my mind to that verse is because we are so quick to forget that we're all unique. We all have something to give, and God has a purpose and peace for every one of our lives. But what happens is life comes in like a flood. Things happen to us, and instead of just remembering that we're unique and that we are precious to God and we have something to give, we take on these adaptive armors to protect ourselves, to mask, to just control the situation so that we don't have to keep dealing with, and we don't have to come face to face with what the real issue is. And the other scripture that I wanted to remind you is Jeremiah 1:5. It says, "Before I formed thee in the belly, I knew thee. And before thou camest forth out of the womb, I sanctified thee, and I ordained thee a prophet unto the nations." That is a reminder that, again, each one of us are unique. God made, no two people are the same. No two people have the same fingerprints. Every one of us is unique and precious and special to God. We all have something to give. And if we allow the storms of life to wreck that, we're not living in the purpose and peace that God intended for us. And that's what this whole entire Navigate series is about. He drills that in every lesson. We are to be living in the purpose and peace that God had intended for our life. And that's walking in the fulfillment of what he has for us and what he wants us to do for his kingdom, and just living for him a righteous life so that we can see him in heaven. And I think if we keep in mind that we are all unique, we're all special, and that we can look at these adaptive armors that we might have taken on and start to shed those layers and look and see that God is in control if we allow him to be. If we trust him with the hurts, the downfalls, the things that we've gone through, he is there for us, just like he was for David fighting Goliath. Right? He was a little shepherd boy, killed a giant. We all have giants in our lives, but throwing on that heavy adaptive armor would only protect us for a short time. It's not going to get us very far. I don't know if you have ever looked at how heavy armor is. It is extremely heavy. I don't know how the knights would walk around in that heavy metal armor and actually be able to fight. But that's what they used. Now the police officers and stuff, they have like bulletproof. They make the new bulletproof vests and things that are like lightweight, but they can stop a bullet. It's is it titanium? Mike, do you know titanium? I just think that's pretty cool. Look how far we've come in the years from heavy armor that the knights used to have to wear to lightweight titanium that'll stop a bullet. But regardless, we shouldn't have to be carrying around extra armor that's not needed. We should be able to be ourselves with people and let God use us to the best of our abilities, right? So I hope through these 13 lessons that something has touched your heart, that you have grown, that you can heal from some things that maybe have been holding you back. Because as Pastor said, our vision for the church is, we want the best for every one of you. We want everybody to be able to grow, to heal, and to be used mightily for the kingdom of God. So I love you all. I did have Lori grab some baked goods, and I think there's coffee out there, so we have a little bit of time before the worship and preaching. So go have some fellowship time.